So, what we will talking about? We will talking about backend responsibilities. Nowadays, I see that because of AI era, I hope will be only one moment when I will say about what we see on the job market, because it's pain for everybody of us. But what I see that so often backend or front-end developers transferring to be full stack engineers. And for doing this right, I would like to share with you my personal experience. Not as fractional CTO, but as a person who is responsible to create a code. And today we will have demo and explanation why it should be like this. So, when you're responsible of create API, from my perspective, you as a person who create this API for internal usage, or external usage if you create public API, your role not finishing on only deploy your code, but also you're responsible for create the best developer experience for your teammates and create after generated SDK for doing their job. So, let's count that I already introduced myself and Node.js recipes. If you don't know, find this as domain. You will able to subscribe on my Telegram channel. So this QR code you can scan and you will see the source code what I will do during this demo. It's typical project what on regular basis I as consultant see what created with a lot typical mistakes for best developer experience. So some details how we actually receive this. It's open source e-learning project, and technical specs of this project I will right now show you. So what we can see here, let me actually do it more interesting. We will jump to the first step for make some intrigue for you. So, when we're talking regarding backend and front end, it's open sourced, and let's just see what we have here. I only copy pasted in our folders 2 repositories, and backend, as you can see here in package.json, is typical Nest.js project. So we have very small amount of something new. For example, only JOS package for validation of JWT. It's not something what you will see in the boilerplate created with Nest CLI. All other things like class transformer, all of the things is what you will see if you will open how-to on Nest.js. For web part of the demonstration repository looks more interesting. It's represent micro front-end architecture built with turbo repo, but it's actually monorepo. If we say about backend, it's monolithic application, but in web we see 2 apps, admin and web. From my personal perspective, from architectural perspective, this project has the first big issue. If you create admin with traditional web development approach, it's something what you need to improve. Not typical code like React, Vue, whatever, but low-code solution like Retool is the right things to do here. Okay, but main pain what we will see here is actually in the code. So from backend perspective, we see that we generate our Swagger and we have systems of our types. In command, not command, we have good like module, core, and here in entities, you can see models, what we have, and we have models like this one, DTOs. And if we will check, for example, post DTO, what is right things to do to describe DTO for provide that, and it will automatically create it as a Swagger definition, but your front teammates need to manually replicate these things as part of your code base here. Look on that. You see, we have the same things like post status, and you write your code twice. Of course, you can say, OK, let's share code with some NPM packages or create instead two different repositories for backend and frontend. Let's create mono repo and use packages, similar like we have here in web. My developer experience shows that this approach is not efficient at all. Why? Because in mono repository, you would like to deploy your software in different moments, because monolithic deploys sucks like monolith. And because of that, I'm saying that generation these things is main idea of this talk. So we make short review of our code, what we will modify. Let's jump on slides. So, in this project, you can see typical problems when it's not AI generated, but human generated. No time invested in test. With AI, because test generation is cheap, we typically see that. From my perspective, nowadays, when you think regarding tests generated by AI, it's downside, because it's additional bad code what you're responsible to keep. And regarding code, I would like to talk with you right now. So, responsible and durable. Who know this concept? Could you make a small audience to just verify? OK, so it's not common, and because of that, I will highlight right now the difference between these two terms. So, when we're talking regarding responsible, and this is perfect illustration. From business perspective, these two things looks very similar, but responsible you will throw away after you will eat your sandwich. But the things what looks the same material from business perspective, but it's actually not responsible, it's durable, you use thing for years. It's different kind of material, but looks like very similar. So, examples of responsible terms, what you can see on daily basis in development. First of all, any prototype is throwaway code. If you have some inferior workload or infrastructure, you finish your R&D work, you close your desktop and forgot to shut down that. OK, your DevOps guy just kills the project. A lot of glue code when you just need to integrate several things, and then you will make one more iteration of that. And N8N for creating your agents, it's also example of that. So all of these things has the same characteristic. It's cheaper to fully rewrite, recreate that. So this is meaning of responsible code, software, whatever. If you're talking regarding durable, it's actually what has the main value for business. So it's core production software. It's some long-lived or mission-critical system. So typically, most of code what we are creating we expect as durable. But in my startup reality, most of the code will be actually dispensable. And in some magical moment, business say, oh, perfect, let's use based on this dispensable code, durable product. How you can understand what is actually you have? First, if you have clear ownership and responsibility, it's mostly for durable code. If you have user data, what you need to keep, this part is typically durable. If you have contract with CLIs, if you have long-term support, or you need to keep backward compatibility, you have responsibilities, and this means that your things is durable. Okay, let's check one more characteristic from my perspective regarding durable. It's API specification. From backend perspective, if you responsible for your API, then you need to provide API specification. No specification means that you didn't define how you actually integrate, and durability of your API is not clear. We cannot track breaking changes in your API. So, when we're talking regarding API specification, let me jump to next step in the live coding. And here, I make some changes to make this code runnable. Because let me just show you how actually what we change in the source code for achieve that. So, first of all, one of the biggest pain during onboarding on new project is you want to run this on your computer. And what the author of this code didn't make for us, he didn't make Docker Compose, just for simple run Postgres. Because if you will check, this is simple project, but if you have, for example, Postgres, Redis, some Memcache, some microservices, what you need to run, the Docker Compose is something what will improve your developer experience. And one of the biggest things what you can do for your front-end teammates is create Docker Compose what will run stable version of your API with already all things set up. They will happy and saying you, bless you if you will do that, and maybe a generation of SDK. Also, I make some changes, so .env example you can copy as .env, and as a result of that, you will able to run immediately your application. Just to not make these silly things, I will jump to backend and will think that we already coded all this stuff, and I will run start. Let's do this in dev mode, so you can see that we have our application running. Perfect. Because at the backend, under the hood, I already run a Docker Compose. Let me just demonstrate to you that we connected to real database. Docker desktop. Live demo. Okay, it's going on some backend. Let's jump to our Swagger to demonstrate that we provide these things. So on local port, I think this one, yes. So this is after generated Swagger file. It's part of most of frameworks to generate based on your source code generate your endpoint's definition. So we can see here, for example, we will play with categories. It's admin. We're not interested in that. Let's check category. It's here. Let's try it out. So we execute it, and we see results that we have one category as response of this API. Perfect. So we have Swagger UI, and this is actually one of reasons why I choose this specific project for demonstrate what you see here. We looks like backend developer already implemented what we need for make integration. You can see any of endpoint and front-end engineer can make something not well maintained, but it's work. And you can do this stuff, just ask your LLM to do this. Let's jump to categories and see how page looks like. You see, we querying with fetch API endpoint, we received response, and our next application can render these categories. Looks like it's work, and it's for long living development process, it's the right thing to do. But let's make one example of the problem. Let's imagine because of some reason, we make decision that we want to rename from content, it will be, I don't know, LMS. And in this case, you will need to make changes on backend side and on front-end side here, and also test all these things. But what is the source of these lines? These strings can be after generated. It's the same way as we can generate also this page category definition. It already exists here in our schema. You can see it here. You can deterministically. And this is one of most important part of describing what we see nowadays with durable. When you're talking regarding a durable code, you want to have this code as stable and deterministic result of this code, what we want. Because of that, using your specification as source and tool, not AI agent for coding, but some tool would make code generation deterministically. It's the right things to develop. Why it's so important? We have too much things what is responsible nowadays in development. This time to market, pressure from business that they don't know what they want and they find the market fit and they want to scale as fast as possible. And integration part between backend and frontend is things what you can very easy to do durable. It's like metal what you can do in one part of big system. Durable, in other part, it will be not so durable, but it also work because they are no big needs of make this part of your application as good as integration. Because of that, I'm jumping to say you what typical API specification you have. And most of us know Swagger, or also known as OpenAPI. we use that so often. So typically when we say API, we mean REST API, what is described as Swagger/OpenAPI. Some of engineers has benefits of working with GraphQL. Because if you're able to create REST API without the contract, you're not able to create a GraphQL server without this contract. And because of that, GraphQL, it's one of good things for developer experience. Also, I need to highlight that we see very popular from the Google protocol buffers, and I recommend you, if you need to integrate not front-end and back-end, but microservices, use protocol buffers, because it will have the smallest overhead for communication. And the last, but so important nowadays, when server-side events receive rocket level of usage because of needs to keep streaming from LLMs in front end. The same with some events via WebSockets. I think API specification or webhooks covered as part of Swagger. It's the right things to know and use as backend developers who want to provide your teammates specification. Okay, so what API specification we see from different big companies you see on the screen, and API specification and SDK are different because SDK is code what you can run. Specification is what human and machine can read, not run, just read. Of course, you can say that nowadays AI agents can run any markdown, but let's be in focus of deterministic result of running your code. And what is the best example of developer experience in SDKs, from my perspective, is Stripe. Because most of companies would provide you ability to generate SDKs will use in market speaking like create Stripe level of SDKs. This is example of the code, and what take away of these slides I want to say you that API versioning we so often use like patch, minor, so firmware version. I really like that Stripe use version of the contract of API based on day when they first time published that. And I think this is a smart idea to using this. Let's define steps what typically you do during SDK generation. First of all, you extract endpoint models and data types from the specification. And by specification, I mean not the YAML file. I mean reusable part of that. Then you generate code. Tools on the market, very big amount. During this demonstration, I will demonstrate you only one, Orwell. During Q&A session, as a whole, if you want, I can demonstrate you some other tools what very good for that. And the last, what you do in creating SDK, you adding some utilities. Authentication, retries, error handling is the things what you add as secret sauce specifically for your team needs. So, what main ideas in this part of the slides? API should have contract defined as specification. If your API doesn't have this contract, you're not able to generate and you're not able to validate. Is this API work as we discussed or not? We cannot check do we create breaking change or not. Next, client integration should be generated from this specification, not these things when we manually create our types, not these things when we manually define endpoints what should be queried. It should be generated. So it's demo time, and let me switch to the main. And what we have after we will set up Orwell. Let's jump and see. First of all, if you remember, we had the fetch function. Let's make code generation right now as a command and see that it will be deterministically. So we will not have changes. Right now, my backend is not working, and because of that, when I'm trying to run this command, generate, it will fail it. Because, oh, sorry, 1 second. Let's make it one more time. Okay, so we here at wrong place. Let's close it. Okay, and yes. npm run API generate. Boring part. Oh, of course. I need to jump to web. Okay, so it's failed because if we will check how we define our SDK generation tool, we use for that Orwell. Let me open the website of Orwell to demonstrate you several things what are key characteristics. First of all, it's RESTful client generation. If you need to generate other kind of client, for example, for GraphQL, this is different tools to better that. If you need to use if you need to generate some other type of code, I also have slides for that. So, Orwell help you to do these things. First of all, you need to have some input with your specification. These things, instead of typing every time, I set up this configuration. And as input, I hard-coded backend what should be run on the local your computer. If you will compare this configuration from real project, let me open that and demonstrate you. This is example. I think my teammates from the audience will say, oh, not do that, not demonstrate our source code, but I don't care. So we can see that here I provided this is our JSON as input. And I provided this as environment variable. What benefits it provides? I can use it for local development to regenerate the SDK, or I can run as part of my CLI, using my CLI commands as part of CI/CD in GitHub Action. So we have this Orwell config, and we say that please generate me this endpoint definition here. So what we'll do in other, let's make font bigger. We'll jump to backend and start this. Right now, because of this specific flag that you need to clean the folder, we don't have in our SDK any file. Let's generate them. So we jump in here and we running one more time our command. And as a result, we see that we don't have missed files anymore, and we see the model. We have a lot models here. So, for example, we have this controllers find 200. The response what we have here resolving reference. Okay, and we see that we have generated category definition. Let's verify that they look very similar to what we had in our packages and what was manually created as part of our models. So, category. We see that we have these values. Let's copy and see it on one screen. So, category detail, and here they looks identically. Only one difference, the name. And this is magic of reusing your specification. Why it's work better than you have shared code? Because right now we see front-end and back-end created with the same language. But let's imagine that we want to use here not a client as web application. You want to use mobile client and we have Swift. You can use the same approach, generate SDK, and as a result of that, reduce mistakes and speed up your development flow. What I mean by speed up development flow? Let's imagine that we want to make breaking change on our backend side. And we, because of some reason, we want to make renaming in our category DTO. So, let's check that. This is category service. We're saying these things. And here, you want to say that it will be not Slack, it will be tag, as example. And here, we think that we need to restart. I think that it should be in this mode. Now, we have this as mistake. One more time. Let's make refactoring, rename, and it will be tag. OK, search in Slack, looking for usage. Actually, because of that, I prefer to use, because of this magic on refactoring, prefer to use WebStorm for this type of work. When you're working with AI things, some anti-gravity, cursor, all of that works much better. And here we have our application already running, and let's make generation one more time. And look on what we have now. We see that category DTO here in our front-end part already have these things. Now I can run TypeScript checking if we have some errors, front-end developer, or I as back-end developer responsible for making such type of refactoring on back-end and front-end side can fix that. And this dramatically speed up your development and improve quality. OK, what we learned now, right now? First of all, this Orwell config would describe not this one, sorry, this Orwell config, of course. What we have in our web part, This URL config say place where we need to generate our files, what client we use. And this actually things what I think we need to highlight, that we run here in our SDK, sorry, in lib, we have the custom fetch, what is create for us ability to receive authorized responses. And we don't need copy paste again and again the same code what we have a lot of places there. So here in categories we remove it, but it's still keep, for example, here in blocks you can see that get post. And this type of modification 3 years ago, this type of modification, when I started to use SDK, I made with code mods. It's typical approach for front-end teams to update some libraries like Tailwind from 3 to 4 version, automatically migrate source code in your project with code mods. And I don't think that right approach to ask your AI to look this example and make it like that. I think right approach is create with AI the code mod will do on the project all type of such modification. Okay. So, we talked about these things, and let me jump back to slides and demonstrate you what we need to highlight. Situation, what to do if you front-end developer and there are no API specification. What do in this case? You're not able to force your backend developers to provide this API specification. What to do in this case? Try to talk with your managers to add in your development cycle API first design approach. What does this mean? Before implement new feature, you splitting work in parallel for backend and frontend because you have the convention how for this specific feature payload and endpoints will work. So you're not talking regarding providing you the artifact, because here the problem is there are no artifacts. And instead of blaming and saying, give me this, talk regarding changes the process, how you work. And these things typically work. Of course, it's not so efficient as changing job, because if you change project where you have the API contract, it's work faster, typically, because people change its behavior rarely than jobs. Okay, and focus on this conversation when you're talking regarding adding process of API design first is focus on collaboration. And in this case, you will have the artifact what will be a single source of truth. Why you forcing not the document in Markdown, but something as a YAML file in some of such formats, because it's not only human, but also agent readable, and it's simpler to talk with your engineering manager to force team collaboration to use this approach. There are benefits of using that, but I see that I have only 5 minutes and only one thing what I would like to highlight here. Nowadays, when we want to invite in development process not only other engineers, but also agents, we need specs. For example, Spec Kit from GitHub is a good example. And my personal opinion that it's a great tool, but one of things is missing in the comments is great definition of expected endpoints. If you will use this type of specification for develop your end-to-end application, including backend and front-end on the mobile, you will have better results. Okay, what we need to highlight in the process with API first? You can say that this approach is scalable, and you can use this diagram, and if you want, you can replace human roles with agent roles and sell this in our new era of AI. That look on that, we will receive faster iteration, we will do that, and we will have artifact what will be used during design phase, and then we will check that in implementation phase when we generate our API definition from source code, they are matched. It's much cheaper than use some other types of testing. Okay, this is my favorite joke during last year regarding new tools. TypeSpec, created by Microsoft, deprecate directive. Sorry, not directive, decorator. And it was funny, and it was a lot likes at Twitter thread regarding these things. But if we will jump on one moment in definition how they looks like in all of that contracts, specification languages, you will see one of biggest pain. Too many words. Lack of reusability. For example, if I have API endpoint what need to be paginated, I need to duplicate it in every place. And TypeSpec is right things to do. I have only a couple of seconds before I finish this. And if you want to receive something as field of be expert, not related to AI, from my perspective, this language can boost your career as architect. And I wish you to take away from the talk what you need. That's all from my side, and I inviting you to have a Q&A session and receive. Sorry? A question?
We don't have questions and answers here, but you can talk to Nikita after his session in the Q&A zone. It's near the enter of this hall.
Give me some upliftment, please.